Kabbalah and Wisdom of the Body, a presentation by Professor Gershom Zaitchik, Faculty of Medicine, Hebrew University of Jerusalem. Introduction. Let's start with a simple question. Who am I? I notice in myself two realms. One is consciousness, which I call mind. It is the site of my will and conscious experiences. The second is unconsciousness, called here wisdom of the body, VOB. It consists of all processes in my body which operate in me and keep me alive. I am particularly interested in VOB and its medical potential. After all, VOB heals all self-healing conditions. Might we apply its wisdom to transform cancer into a self-healing condition? VOB has some important features which medicine still ignores. One, while mind thinks serially, VOB reasons in parallel. This feature I described in autistic savants whose memory operates in parallel. Or the VOB neurological manifestations are described in Damasio's book, which I discuss in another presentation. The book is called Self Comes to Mind, Constructing the Conscious Brain by Antonio Damasio. Then comes the placebo effect, which medicine ignores. It is an important VOB feature by which it activates physical chemical processes in the body. Recently I turned my attention to Jewish meditation and its potential to induce cancer dormancy, which I described in another presentation. Jewish meditation is a Kabbalistic method to interact with VOB. In my presentation I discuss its potential to manipulate physical chemical processes in VOB. It was written by Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan. It's in a book which is called Jewish Meditation, a Practical Guide. Aryeh Moshe Eliyahu Kaplan was born on 23rd of October 1934 and died in the age of 48 years. He was a noted American Orthodox rabbi and author known for his intimate knowledge of both physics and Kabbalah. Rabbi Kaplan studied the unconscious realm, VOB, from the Kabbalah perspective. He says, there are thus two parts to the mind. One that is under control of the conscious will, called consciousness, while the other, that which is not, is called unconscious. There is an analogy between his system and the mind-VOB axis, which I study. His conscious mind is what I defined as mind. His unconscious mind is a VOB analog. This is my key to the medical interpretation and implementation of Jewish meditation and Kabbalah. I shall now discuss Rabbi Kaplan's last book, Inner Space, Introduction to Kabbalah, Meditation and Prophecy, edited by Abraham Sutton. The book has two parts, Introduction to Kabbalah and Meditation and Prophecy. I am fascinated by the worldview of this great sage. He says, we are living now in a time of breaking barriers. Everything that people always assumed to be impossible is becoming possible in our time. The idea of transcending the limitation of the physical world is not restricted to meditative practices. In general, it involves going beyond any barriers and boundaries that were thought impossible to overcome. While these barriers exist in our mind, they are not an attribute of Wob. Yet mind, by its will, imposes them on Wob. Kabbalah describes a method to free Wob from this restraint. In other presentations, I describe how these barriers dominate medicine. Definition of Kabbalah. The truth is that Kabbalah is really the ultimate synthesis of mysticism and logic. Since mysticism resides in Wob, Kabbalah is also a synthesis of mind and Wob. There are three branches of Kabbalah. Theoretical deals with microcosm, which is man, and macrocosm, which is universe. The second is meditative. It explores both realms within the inner space. And the third is practical or magic. When God created the world, macrocosm, he created also man, microcosm. Both have the same structure. Mathematically, one could say that man is a one-to-one mapping of the cosmos. Macro and microcosm are called respectively outer and inner space. Meditation is a way to explore the microcosm, Wob, and deduce the structure of macrocosm, divine. Theoretical Kabbalah provides the signposts of the inner space, microcosm. Inner space is an account by a Kabbalist physicist to convince the reader that Kabbalah is not an esoteric practice of the occult, but a genuine science of the inner space. The book consists of two parts, introduction and meditation. Although I am interested mainly in the second part, I shall discuss some aspects of the first part in order to convey its flavor. Kabbalah has all the ingredients of a science. It defines its own space, called inner space, starts with a set of axioms, what is God, derives its arguments with logic and mathematics, known as gematria. Over the millennia, Kabbalah adopted all important ingredients of other cultures and incorporated them into its unique brand, science. Like Eastern philosophy, Brahman and Atman, Western philosophies, Aristotle and Plato, Western logic and mathematics. And it's interesting that the four letters of the divine name represent the four elements: fire, water, air, and earth. For instance, the Eastern Brahman Atman concept may seem analogous to God's soul, while Brahman Atman concept remained frozen in time. God's soul is a process that evolves over the millennia, incorporating important concepts of the evolving Western culture. They were blended within the inner space of the absolute unconscious, which I call Wob. The culmination of this evolution was synthesized into one science by the Ari, Rabbi Yitzchak Luria, who lived in Safed in the 16th century. Ari deserved to be called the Jewish Newton of the unconscious inner space. From the dawn of the Western culture, philosophy and later on psychology were preoccupied mainly with the conscious, with the mind. Unconscious was regarded as an irrational, beastly, or even evil. Carl Gustav Jung was the first to study the unconscious systematically, yet he scraped only its surface, far from the depths which Ari revealed. In the summer of 1916, Jung has his one-time mystical experience or meditation, known as the 7 Sermons to the Dead. It provides an interesting glimpse into Wob and Kabbalah. It is a bare shadow of the inner space as described by the prophet Ezekiel, but you can read it in my site. In order to give you an idea what sort of a science Kabbalah is, let's start with a paradox. And God made man in his image. What might be the image of an entity or concept that is without description? You find the answer in Rabbi Kaplan's book. This image indicates that we received from God his capability to create even a universe. The secret of God's creation is kept in our Wob. This microcosm is a miniature version of God's macrocosm. We may thus explore this secret with meditation, which I shall discuss later. The insight derived from meditation trips is analyzed scientifically by theoretic Kabbalah. We may now examine how Kabbalah relates to the creation of universes by humans like Stephen Hawking. Following God's example, Big Bang also arose from the emptiness, known as ex nihilo. Yet unlike God's creation, Big Bang still evolves within emptiness. According to Kabbalah, emptiness does not exist, since God permeates all space. Hawking's universe might lack an important insight. It took several decades for physics to conclude that indeed emptiness does not exist. It was replaced by Higgs field. This insight drives physics one quantum leap toward Kaplan's inner space. Einstein explored his universes within the inner space. I believe that he meditated relativity and performed his Gedanken experiments or thought experiments within the inner space using meditation. Within the inner space, Einstein realized that chance and randomness do not exist in nature. His God does not play dice is a Kabbalist statement. According to Kabbalah, chance or randomness do not exist in God's creation. Chance is the brainchild of his image. Like Hawking's universe, the theory of quantum mechanics lacks an ingredient or insight and is incomplete. You can read about this in my site or in another presentation. Quantum entanglement threatens to disrupt quantum and relativity theory. It connects what hitherto was separated. This insight is another quantum leap of physics toward the inner space, where God's presence connects the entire cosmos. While string theory drowns in 11 dimensions, Kabbalah is satisfied with 5. Its cosmology consists of 5 universes, while modern physics drowns in a multiverse. They ought to visit the inner space. You might dislike this comparison of physics with the esoteric. Nevertheless, you have to admit that physics metaphors are weirder than those of Kabbalah. So let's turn now to the inner space, where physics has nothing to say. The first chapter of Ezekiel is a verbal documentation of his trip into his inner space, warp. It is accompanied by a lucid explanation by Rabbi Kaplan. So he says, let us look at the 5 levels of Ezekiel's vision in a meditative sense. First level of meditation, you are aware of your own life processes. Then it blanks out. You can see the potential there, but it is an opacity. This is the black cloud. Next stage, before actually coming to nothingness, is the self-talking fire, a blinding negative light. Once experience the 3 levels, then all of a sudden you start seeing a glow around the fire, and inside the glow, in the fire that is in the middle of it, you see something the color of chashmal. This vision is the foundation of Kabbalah. For more than 2 millennia, it bred many interpretations by great minds in hundreds of books and documents. This is also my gateway to the WOB. In his introduction to Jewish meditation, Rabbi Kaplan wrote, people are often surprised to hear the term Jewish meditation. Otherwise, knowledgeable Jews, including many rabbis and scholars, are not aware that such a thing exists. Yet, Judaism produced one of the more important systems of meditation. And since Judaism is an Eastern religion that migrated to the West, its meditative practices may well be those most relevant to the Western man. Indeed, Jewish meditation is also most relevant to Western medicine. Listen to his definition of meditation. Thought directed by will, or thinking in a controlled manner, or so through meditation one can control thought processes and learn to think in a new way. Rabbi Kaplan says, there are thus 2 parts to the mind. One that is under control of the conscious will is called consciousness, while the other, that which is not, is called unconscious. They are, to me, mind and verb. Let's return to the vision of the great sage. We are living now in a time of breaking barriers. Everything that people always assumed to be impossible is becoming possible in our time. This is also the dawn of a new kind of medicine, which I described in my site. Thank you.